Corey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Corey Wrenn. I'm a lecturer in sociology at the University of Kent in Canterbury, England. I'm the past chair of the animals section and co-founder of the International Association for Vegan Sociologists. And I also am a founder of Vegan Feminist Network, which is where a lot of this is actually going to be sourced from, that kind of work I've been doing over the years. And this is also a part of another project I'm collaborating with, which is Animal Ethics from the Margins. And I specialize in vegan studies, social movement theory, and gender stuff as well.
So I will thanks so much, Corey, for doing this. We really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and pass the mic to you.
All right, sweet. So thanks for having me. I was trying to get Facebook Live set up, but it is proving to be difficult. This is a project that is actually many years in the works. Just a little bit of background about myself. I'm, in addition to being a woman in academia, which already kind of puts you in a tough spot, I'm from a really working class background. I even hesitate to use the term working class. I mean, we were really, really poor. I'm from Appalachia. And so to be someone from the working class and to be a woman in academia, and then also kind of burdened, especially by doing animal stuff, it's really difficult to make your way in the field. And so I have, through a lot of trial and error, kind of developed a lot of strategies. And a lot of this is just through my trial and error, but a lot of it also is through a lot of research I've done over the years to kind of improve my odds of making it in a really, really competitive field that we're a part of. Not animal studies per se, but in academia more general. I'm going to offer some tips today on what we might do as far as working towards promotion, improving networking, and I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons of the different channels. One con immediately right now is Facebook, because I couldn't get it to go. I think it's fighting Zoom, and it wasn't letting me use the camera for two things at once. So we're going to talk about some of the pros and cons. There's going to be a lot of different stuff that we cover today, but at the end, I'm going to kind of revisit some things that you all can practically do to improve your networking. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to build a brand, and this kind of works off of a lot of research I've done over the years. This is specifically geared towards junior academics and students, undergraduate and graduate students. But really anybody who might be watching, even if you're not in academia, if you know me from non-academic stuff, I really got my start doing activism online. So a lot of this stuff I've actually learned through my online activism. So everyone who's watching can potentially benefit from this. So there's a whole lot of goodies in store. Also, for established academics, I want to give a shout out to them as well, because a lot of them don't really have much of a social movement game. And so this is a way to kind of survey some of the things you might consider doing to improve your presence in the field. This talk is really about digital marketing. I'm going to have some stuff that's not necessarily digital, but I did want to kind of talk a minute about why digital. I think that the rise of the internet has been one of the greatest things for people who are on the margins. For a lot of us, we have that sense of imposter syndrome where we don't feel, and this is typical for everybody. And in fact, I will say that one of my good friends here at the University of Kent, who's currently the head of school, which is the highest up you can go, he's working class, and he tells me as well he feels like an imposter. So you can be at the top of your game and still feel like you don't really belong if you have some kind of marginalized identity that you're coming to grips with. So using the internet and using digital spaces is a way for us to overcome that and create a sense of community and a little bit of control. So I think that actually the internet might be a boon for us. Doing it digitally also helps us access wider networks. And I think that we definitely have seen that with COVID, where there's so many more opportunities for us to participate in different things and get to know each other in ways that we might have been inhibited with before. And also a wider kind of audience. We're not just dealing with other academics, but we can also interact with activists, nonprofits, the public more generally. So I think this is really important for especially students who are kind of up and coming. When you get into the university as a professional, really whatever you're doing, there's an expectation that your work has some kind of impact. So engaging these wider networks is really strategic. Conference costs, like that's a biggie as well. I know for me, like that would put me in the hole. I couldn't afford to go to a lot of these conferences, and they can be very, very, very expensive. And for me, my graduate program offered us like $300 a year, which didn't cover even a plane ticket most of the time. So going digital is a way for you to overcome that. So I know for me, coming from a poor background, and I couldn't afford to do all this fancy study abroad or going to conferences and all that sort of stuff. But I knew that if I hustled online, I could make a lot of good things happen for myself for just the cost of internet access every month. So this is a really, really important way for us as people from marginalized groups to overcome those barriers. All right, so let's dive in. The number one tip I have for you is to create a research checklist. I use OneNote, that's my favorite. And I have a list. It's about, I'm not gonna lie, it's about this long, single space, 11 size font, where I have all these things that I go off and I do every time I publish anything. And sometimes it's not even something I've published. Like this talk, for instance, I will be promoting, and I'll go through that list and say, where do I put it? Do not wait for other people to bump your work. I think this is the thing for people who are new to academia, new to activism, whatever it may be. You think, well, I'll build it and they will come. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You have to be your own PR agent. You have to be your own advocate, because it's a crowded space out there. So you need to make sure that you're getting your stuff out there, not waiting for other people to kind of recognize that needle in a haystack. One thing you might do, because this is an ASA event, is use ASA channels, especially the sections. One of the biggest things that we do in the section is to support students and to support junior academics and make sure, really, anybody who's a member of that section, why be a member of a section? It's not just because you're interested, because we're a community and we work to support one another. So definitely make use of ASA channels, specifically networks, section networks are really useful for you. I have historically used the bigger stuff as well, footnotes. I don't know if they do this anymore, but anytime I would publish something, I would email the footnotes editor and they would put it in the publication. Section newsletters, we're always looking for people to contribute material to that. I have published in the gender newsletter, the animals newsletter, the social movements newsletter. So this is and that's again, something very open to students. And that's a really easy way to put something on your CV that looks pretty official, and it is peer reviewed to an extent. But it doesn't have all the gravity of going through a regular journal. So you might want to start off with a section newsletter, but also it's useful because it gets your work out there to people who'd be interested. Blogging is really important. I'm going to talk more about blogs later, but for the ASA, different sections run their blogs. Our section, the animal section, runs a blog. In fact, I run that blog. And if you have some ongoing research that you want featured, hit me up. I'd be so pleased to feature it there. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't use that. Actually, I have to email people and ask them to submit. I think it's a complete wasted opportunity. There's other blogs outside of the ASA. There's Sociological Images. I think there's another one. Lisa Wade used to run this, and that historically has been really student friendly as well. I published a lot with them when I was a student, and they know that they're aiming to support students in that way. And there's other professional sociological channels you're probably familiar with that you might want to check out. So yeah, don't wait for other people to bump your work. Use these channels that are available. They're built in order to support you. You might check out animal advocacy research channels like Faunalytics. Faunalytics is a big one. That's on my checklist. Every time I publish anything, I email the editor and say, hey, you might be interested in this, and they'll send it to one of their staff members to review and post on there. And it hits a much bigger audience. So definitely use that source. The ASI, they used to run a blog. I don't know if they do anymore. I used to post lots of blogs with them, and that helped me to meet people. They do a newsletter once a month or so, and they welcome you to submit your work to be featured there. The HSUS, this one is kind of a lesser known one, but they run a research repository. And if you email the person who's in charge of that, it's changed now, I'm not sure who it is, they will set you up with an account, and then you can upload your work as it's produced. It has to be open access for that one. The other one that you need to be taking advantage of is your university media rep. In my university, we're really, really gung-ho on that, where they send us an email every once in a while to remind us, hey, we exist. But I think for a lot of people, you produce your work and then you kind of forget about it and expect that the universe is just going to recognize it, but you're not taking advantage of these resources that are available. There is a media rep who's in charge of maybe not just your school, but at the university level, and you want to reach out to them and say, hey, do you want to promote this? So this talk, for instance, my school, bumped it several times on Twitter. Facebook groups are also really useful because these are spaces that are a little bit more democratic. Lots of different people can become members. There's opportunities for people to leave comments and feedback. But really, they're also useful because they can be very specialized. So for instance, there's an animal ethics and philosophy group that I've been a member of for a few years. And every time I publish anything, I put it in there for people to read and share. Your own blog, I guess I'm going to talk about more of that in later in this talk, but your own blog is also a very vital tool. Podcasts. This one is also something I think a lot of people don't think about. You kind of sit back and wait for someone to invite you and like, why am I not chosen? Actually, the people who run these podcasts oftentimes run out of material and would be very happy if you reached out and said, hey, I've been working on this project and it'd be interesting if we talked about it on your show. You'd be surprised. Snail mail. Oh, sorry to use I don't know if that's a specious term, but actually sending physical mail out into the world. Oh, like I got this in the mail today from my mother. Thank you, Mom. Wow, it makes you feel special when you get something in the mail, doesn't it? So it's not just getting stuff from your family, but imagine getting stuff from colleagues or potential colleagues. There's actually social psychology research on that. When you get something physically in the mail, it gives you a buzz and it makes people pay more attention to it. Some tips I've picked from my other more established academic buddies is building your own kind of arsenal of promotional materials. So print out flyers for books, for instance. So I don't know who here might have a book so far, but what if you ever do write a book, what you'll find is that your editor, they're quite overwhelmed. The publishing house is quite overwhelmed. They don't necessarily provide you with a lot of that promotional materials that back in the day they would have had the opportunity to do. The publishing world is a lot different than it was 20 years ago. But what you can do is sometimes their art department will create a flyer and you can have those printed out professionally, or you can make one yourself. But I know for my second book, they didn't have one. I actually emailed them and asked them to make me one, which they did. And it doesn't cost a lot of money to print those out. Remember, I'm a penny pincher. I don't have tons of money for all this kind of stuff. I went to my local print shop and they printed out 100 really nice looking flyers for me for just $20, right? And that will last me a very long time. You take those with you to conferences. I mentioned snail mail a moment ago. I have a list even of academics, colleagues that I write holiday cards to every year. And every time I write them anything, I'll put a flyer inside. So keep those handy. I keep them with my stationery kit so I can stick them in wherever. But you take them with you to talks, if you go on job interviews and things like that. It's really useful to have when people come up to you and ask you about your work and say, here, check this out. You may also consider having copies of articles on you. I know if you go on the job market, this is really, really useful to do. But if you're going to conferences and anything like that, you might want to bring some of your work with you so that someone has something tangible to take with them. Having something tangible is going to increase the chances that they're actually going to look at it, say if they're in the train going home, in the airplane, or whatever it may be, they'll start flipping through. You also want to order some business cards. If you work for a university, if you're a graduate student, sometimes they'll provide you with these cards. Sometimes they do not. I'm working at the top sociology research institution in the UK, and they did not provide me with cards. Whereas the last one I was at was a small teaching university in New Jersey, and they did give me cards. So you need to kind of be proactive there and get your own cards. Again, they don't cost very much. You can design them yourself. They have some that are pre-designed. But again, for the same reasons you might want to have copies of flyers or articles, you want to have those business cards on hand and always keep some with you in your purse, your wallet, or whatever. And you can stick them in stuff when you mail people. Personalized mailing materials. This is kind of getting persnickety now, but I also really recommend doing this. It adds a bit of professionalism to your communique with folks. Again, it doesn't cost very much to have this stuff produced. You also, if you're, just a side note, if you're on the job market or anything like that, you definitely want to look into this professional type stuff. If you're sending in book proposals, you definitely want to look professional. And for that type of stuff, you want to use stationery that is through your university to show you have an official affiliation. You need to get a professional picture made, right? We need to do that. So that's something you need to do right now, even if you're a student. If you have a friend who's got a fancy camera and is a photographer, great, get them on board. It needs to be consistent. So if you really like to take pictures, I know it's a selfie generation, and the temptation is like, oh, this is a great picture, and that's a great picture, and this is updated. if you keep changing up your professional picture, it can kind of lose your brand. So you need to pick a really good picture and stick with it. I know personally, I only update my picture every few years. Whereas I know some of my colleagues have their professional pictures up that are like 20 years old. And I think that's, kind of taking the piss a bit. But do pick a nice picture, a professionally taken picture, and use it consistently across all your digital platforms. One of the hottest tips, put this in your pocket, go bookmark it right now, is this wonderful website called canva.com. And this is something I learned from my activist days, and I have to give a shout out to Sarah Cade Woodcock, who told me about this years ago. It's a completely free, kind of like a Photoshop page, but it's made to be really foolproof. And they have lots of pre-designed stuff. So you can make things like the promo ad that I made for this event, I used through Canva. You can make logos through Canva. You can design Facebook posts, Twitter posts through Canva, stuff for your website through Canva. And it's completely free. There's some features on there that are paid, like you have to pay a little bit extra. Like if you really like a particular graphic, then you would have to pay like $1 or something. But for the most part, if you work it consciously, you can do things for absolute free. And it really looks professional and really nice. And I think this is one of the best tips that I could offer you, is to check out canva.com. People email me all the time and say, how did you get that made? I did it myself, right? I grew up not having money for this stuff. I had to do it myself. So you have to take the initiative. All right, so that's kind of the basics on the kind of groundwork stuff. But now let's talk about conferences. So this is going to be an area where I'm going to talk a little bit about, now we're in the COVID age and the digital age, but conferences historically have been a very much in-person kind of deal. And historically, you would have to be really, really picky about the ones you go to, unless you're a millionaire and can afford to go to all of these. But I think also it's getting to the point where it's a bit of a conference overload in the age of Zoom, where we have constant invites to do all these sorts of things. So in a way, you still have to be strategic about where you put your time. So for the purposes of our section, when we're talking about animal stuff, we really have two main areas where we can be looking. There's the big professional sociology kind of events, and then there's the critical animal stuff that's interdisciplinary. And each one has its merits. When you're talking about branding, you want to do critical animal stuff because that's where your people are, and that's where you're going to meet the people who care about your work and get to know you and want to promote your work and build relationships with them, and they can be colleagues in the future, co-authors in the future, and so on and so forth. I think the animal section that we're a part of kind of bridges both of those. The bigger sociological stuff, you have to do that for the job market. You simply need to do it for those purposes. So when I was a graduate student and I didn't have much money, I knew, okay, every couple of years, I'm going to save up and definitely make sure I go to the big ASA. I have to do it. I'm really nervous about it, really awkward about it. It's expensive, but I need to do it. I need to do it. I think this year, for those of you who are really dealing with financial problems and your university is not going to reimburse you, this is a great year for you to dip your toes in, because there's a significantly reduced cost with the ASA this year. So yeah, you do the professional sociological, the big ones, to demonstrate you're active in the field and you're part of that professional kind of presence. But you want to think also about doing the critical groups, animal groups, because that's where you're going to meet the people who are most likely to be useful to your animal specific work. However, those tend to be a little less formal. So there's kind of pros and cons to both of those. I do recommend kind of a mixture of both. Digital versus in person. I can be honest, like I'm totally fine now behind the screen here, multiple screens. But in person, when I go to these things, I feel extremely uncomfortable and awkward. I'm a poor kid from Appalachia, and I'm in this middle class space, and I'm, sometimes it's like small things, like I don't even know how to hold a knife and a fork, right? So I feel kind of uncomfortable in those types of places, but it is important to go to them and actually meet people face to face in person. That part of it is really, really relevant. And there's lots of stuff that happens at in-person conferences that you don't get with the internet ones. Stuff that happens outside of the talks, kind of in the hallway sorts of things, the dinners that people go out to, the drinks that people go out to. That's really, really important. So it is important to do that if you can, when things go back to normal.
Corey, hey Corey,
Yes.
Can I interrupt you for a second? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You don't have slides right now, right?
I do, but it's just words. I can.
No. I just want to make sure that you weren't sharing your screen, and because we're not seeing slides. You don't have slides though right now. I'm assuming that you want us to see.
I have slides, but I don't see a share screen. Wait a minute. Oh, there it is. Yeah, let's share it. Okay, y'all haven't missed anything. It's just bullet points. Okay, no pictures. All right, and also this is going to be up on my website, so you can revisit this if that's useful. Thanks, Erin.
No, thank you. Sorry, I didn't let you. I didn't even. It didn't occur to me. I was so enthralled. I didn't even notice.
Oh, yeah.
Slides.
Well, see, this is another. I was about to talk about digital conferences, and this is one of the things about them. Like you kind of like, I'm by myself looking at the screens, don't know what I'm seeing. And this happened to me. I did an animal history conference a couple months ago and did the whole thing. And I actually spent a lot of time on a beautiful PowerPoint and forgot to share screen and kill myself. So yeah, the digital part, as I mentioned, you can get overwhelmed when there's lots of opportunities to present. You have to kind of back it up. I get really gung-ho on this, and I want to really get my name out there as much as possible while it's cheap to do so. I think that's a strategy, but also, there's a cost to that. You definitely feel overwhelmed by all the opportunities. So, don't beat yourself up if you feel like you can only go to one or two of these digital ones a year. I think the digital ones are mostly useful for people in the margins because of that purpose, though, because you don't have to pay a lot of money to go to them. But be aware that you're missing out on a lot of the key things from the in-person ones. So you have to come in and try to make the best of it instead of like showing up to the conference, presenting and dipping out, which is what I often do because I just get overwhelmed. Actually stay and chat in the chat box, reach out to people by email and make the most of it. You also should take initiative. This is another thing that I wish I could go back in time and tell myself. I remember the first time I got accepted to present at the ASA in the animal section. I was like, wow, this is such a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal, but now that I've been in the game a while, I realize actually we're hoping students submit their work. And how many things I maybe have missed out on because I didn't feel confident enough to do it. So remember that imposter syndrome. We need to nip that in the bud. Conferences are designed to be student friendly. It's not just for networking for the pros, but it's a place to kind of introduce newcomers and give them opportunities to build their portfolio. So if you've never submitted, make that your goal for 2021. Submit to a conference. There's really nothing to lose now that you don't have to worry about the cost of flying somewhere or driving somewhere and hotels and all that nonsense. Do not wait also to be invited for some of these things. So some like the ASA where you have to submit and then you're chosen. Other conferences, they send out invites and then you see the list come up and it says, oh, these are the speakers. And you're like, wait, what about me? I didn't even get a chance. If that happens, you're like, I think I really have something that I can contribute. Email the presenters. That when I've organized conferences, people have done that. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, we do have space for you and that would be great. We'll definitely squeeze you in. Sometimes we'll be like, well, we've already had it set. We didn't intend to open it up to people. Sorry, maybe next time. But more often than not, there'll be room for you if you really feel that there's something that you can contribute. So again, be your own cheerleader. You have to take initiative, invite yourself. You might also consider contributing a panel. Oftentimes conferences really like that. So if you and some of your colleagues or some people you know of and would like them to be colleagues who have similar work, you might email the organizers and say, I'd like to put together a panel. So don't forget that's an opportunity. Another thing, remember I mentioned a moment ago that when you're at these digital conferences and the temptation is to kind of turn your camera off and zone out and whatever, don't waste your time. If you're going to take time to go to these conferences online, make the most of them. They're not just there to learn about other people's work in progress. They're the opportunities to network. So one of the things that I do, whether it's online or in person, is I actually will, what's it called? Like the agenda, I forget the schedule or whatever. I go through at the end of the conference and I say, okay, this person, this person, this person, these all look like relevant people to my work and someone I might want to know. And I actually email them and introduce myself. In person, people come up and will introduce themselves as well, looking through that. So you have to take initiative because honestly, what will often happen with these conferences is people use them as places to come together and get to know, or to catch up with their friends. And sometimes they can be a little bit insular. So you have to, again, take initiative. I also suggest you record your talks for promotional purposes. You can put that on YouTube, on your website, etc. If you're going on the job market, it would be really excellent if the people who are considering you could actually click and see you in action. You can also, and this is something I'm doing for this talk, is to turn your slides into a PowerPoint, or sorry, into a PDF and upload them to academia.edu, your website, and elsewhere. So again, like I said, forgot to share screen, but all of this is going to be, it's actually already up there on academia.edu and on my website, so that people who weren't able to come are able to see it. So again, it helps this have an afterlife, if you will. Oh, okay. So now we're kind of getting into the service element of it. I wanted to, again, remind you to be your own cheerleader here and take initiative, volunteer. This is really, really, really important for networking and getting to know people. So for instance, the number one thing that I would suggest, besides guest blogging, it would be to participate in ASA council opportunities. Guest blogging is a simpler way, a more democratic way of going about it, because the ASA, you have to actually be put on the election ballot and voted in and all that sort of stuff. But anybody can guest blog, whether you're an academic or not. Again, a little bit of a secret here is that a lot of these blogs are desperate for content. So this is actually where I got a lot of my networking start from, back in our early 20s. Anytime any of these kind of blogs would put out a call, we need writers, I would volunteer myself. And sometimes they might not even put a call out, and you can just email the editor and say, I think I have things to contribute to this. So unless it's something huge, like a major blog or a major website, if it's something more within our field, they're probably really desperate for some content, like sociological images that I mentioned earlier. So you might want to reach out. And again, this is important for not just your academic audience, but something broader. And then even within academia, when I was hired here at Kent, they really appreciated that I had this kind of focus on the public, and I could demonstrate that I'm engaged with people outside of the ivory tower. A word of wisdom here, though: please be mindful of your time. Just like with conferences, don't kind of spread yourself too thin. Be careful with guest blogging. Do your research on this. I have a lot of horror stories on blogs that I joined because I was just naive. I was young and naive, and I was just like, oh, a website, I'll join it. And they don't have much impact. So you put a lot of time into writing these blogs, and then nobody reads them. Is that really worth your time? So really look around and see. Like the first time, anytime someone asks me to contribute to a blog, the first thing I do is I go check out their website. Does it look credible? And the second thing I do is I go to their social media page. How many followers do they have? So I had to turn down one a month ago because they had like 100 Facebook likes. Like, is that really worth my time? Probably not. Sorry. So be careful about that, and also be paying attention to the mentorship. So I've blogged with a lot of websites where the people running it weren't necessarily working in your interests. I could give, again, some horror stories there. So are the people who are in charge of that in looking out for you and hoping that will be a mutually beneficial relationship, or are they just looking to exploit young people who don't know any better, right? So be thinking about that. Maybe reach out to some of the other authors. If anybody's familiar with AFCO, me and AFCO used to contribute to this feminist blog that ended up just imploding, and it was a really miserable experience. And like I said, I have multiple examples of that. However, like I said, blogging is a really democratic, easy way for us to get our work out there. And again, beyond just academia. And it gives us skills in writing in a way that is more digestible for the wider public. Again, a shout out to the ASA sources. Our newsletters are always looking for contributors. Our website, if you go and look on the ASA animal section, and I'm the webmaster for that, so you can always just reach out to me if you have something you want featured. It's just a really easy way, and it looks professional. So I had someone who I had emailed a couple of months ago because I was looking to get the blog updated because nobody was sending me anything. You have to be proactive, right? And I got his blog post on there, and once it was up there, he emailed me back and he says, wow, I've never had anything associated with the ASA before. This is so amazing. I'm so excited for this. I was like, geez, if more people knew that they could do this. So you just need to be proactive and realize that these channels are awaiting folks like you. They're designed to support people like you. They're not the domain of the elite. Another thing that you can be doing, as I mentioned before, getting involved with the council of the ASA is a really important way for you to demonstrate your professionalism and to get your name out there and to help build a brand. So I know for our section and the animal section, we just, in full honesty, because I was in charge of the election ballot this year, and I was I've been in the council for many years now. We have to struggle sometimes to find enough people who are willing to serve. And I think some of that might be that imposter syndrome. Who am I? Like, we're looking for people like you. If you're committed and you care and you feel like this is a mutually beneficial situation, then come on board. So yeah, we actually struggle a lot of years to get enough people to do this. And one of the things I did last year as chair was to create a document that demystified all the things that we do in council so that people will have an idea before they sign up for it. What actually am I supposed to be doing? But then also, if you do sign up for it, when you go on the job market or you're trying to build your CV, you could say, here's the different things that I've done. So definitely consider, if not in the animal section, in some of the other sections, running for council. You might also consider doing Facebook admin for whatever groups it may be. I know the ASA Animals group, we're often looking for people to contribute content for that. But this is another one that comes out of my activist days. This is one of the best ways to collaborate with people and build your networks, is to do that service, the admin work, where you monitor comments and find content to post on there. Because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. For my feminist network, Vegan Feminist Network page, I've been updating that sucker since 2013. And I just have it on my to-do list every day. I update Twitter, I update Facebook, all my different pages. And I have this wonderful man named Marv Wheel, who's in Canada, and he's been like my right-hand guy ever since. And bless him, like, he does it completely out of his passion for the topic, but he helps me to keep it fresh. So we need people who are willing to do that. And that's something that, again, talking about imposter syndrome, no matter who you are, you can find good stuff on social media. We're all experts on scrolling, right? Reviewing is another excellent way for you to do service. In the ASA, we're always looking for people for our awards committee to determine what the best papers are, but also just reviewing in general. So especially if you're a graduate student or junior academic, doing that review service is really, really important, and such an important contribution to the field. And you get to know editors and you get to know other colleagues. And again, this is one where this is just a sad state of the publishing world today, where, like, here in the UK, we're explicitly told, don't bother with reviewing. It doesn't help us with, UK is a whole different system as far as priorities. And we're explicitly told, don't waste your time with reviews. I continue to do that because I think it's important to give back to the field, but also for the networking purposes you build up with editors and the like. So you might consider when you get those emails asking you to review, or you can be proactive once again and go to some of your favorite journals, perhaps Society and Animals, and sign up as a reviewer. You can do that through the form. Editorial boards as well, depending on your level. We just started a sociology journal for vegan sociology. It's a student journal. That's an excellent way, if you're interested in vegan stuff, to be a part of an editorial board. But this is one that tends to be a little bit more by invite when they're more of the serious journals, more professional journals, but that's definitely something that you consider doing, again, for the networking purposes. And it does look good on your CV. In all these cases, remember to determine your value for time. Now, I haven't mentioned this before. When we're doing all this hustling, and we're kind of desperate, if we're especially burdened by our gender or race, ability, whatever it may be, that we want to do all this extra work to kind of compensate for the social capital and the economic capital, wherever it may be, that we lack. However, there is also the problem where marginalized groups can be really taken advantage of when it comes to this kind of free work. So be mindful of that as well. Okay, we're getting near towards the end. I do have to give a shout out to social media. I mentioned that before. This is key. You want to build your brand. You want to become relevant, stay relevant, do your social media bit. So here is just an example of kind of screenshots from the stuff that I run. Notice how on each one of these, except for Instagram, I'm about to mention what's different there, but notice, like, my Twitter, my Facebook, my website, all that sort of stuff, there's consistency. Using like 2 or 3 professional photos. I've got my books there for everybody to see, right? So you have that consistency, you have a professional look to it. It's very important, right? I have one of my friends, one of my colleagues who co-directs the Social Movement Center here at Kent, and his picture is like him with, like, looks like he's drunk at the bar. Okay, fine, if that's your brand, but you may want to look a little bit more like, you're here not to play, but for serious stuff. Make sure you are hitting all those major channels. I actually did not do Twitter until recently. I had a Twitter account when I was in grad school, and then I realized I was just using it to kind of argue with people, and it wasn't really looking good for my professional persona. So I closed that account. But then when I got to the University of Kent, because we're such a big research culture here, it was really, they really imparted on me, you've got to get a Twitter account. It's really vital. And indeed, they were right. It's a whole different Twitter ballgame nowadays since I quit back in 2013. So one thing you should be doing is upping your Twitter game, and retweeting people is important, kind of quick quid pro quo, and being fresh and active. Don't just post once a month. If you can't post more than once a week or so, then don't do it. Facebook as well. I've been running my Facebook page for, gosh, almost 10 years now. And I've built up quite a following. If you go in there and you look, it says I've got like 30-some thousand followers, and that's not organic. And I'll be honest, you can pay for advertising. And remember, I'm a penny pincher. I don't got money for this stuff. I would put in just a few dollars a month, just a few dollars, and it would slowly grow my base. So I'm going to be honest, like a lot of that is just people who maybe don't really care about my work. They're just like, oh, look at this, pictures are interesting, and that, but that's fun. It's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, right? So this imposter syndrome, maybe we can kind of push back on that and like kind of create a persona, you know, fake it till you make it. But I do appreciate that I can say, look at my Facebook account, and you can see that, you know, I do have people who take me seriously. Whether or not all of them are there for my work or there for kind of cute dog pictures is a different story, but it is important to kind of create that persona at least. Now, Instagram is my kind of real me account. It's open. I don't have a personal Facebook account that's open. In fact, I don't even use my real name on Facebook because I've had, as any feminist has experienced, harassment in the past. But my social media account that is open, my private account that is open, is on Instagram. So people can see the real me. And this is not just me being like, oh, look at me, but this is actually supported by research where people are talking about marketing and building a brand. To some extent, you want to show that you're an actual human being. So if you go to my Instagram account, you can see pictures of food, vegan food I've made, my dog, my cat, socks, pictures of Canterbury and things like that. And people can connect with you as a real human being. So you might also want to consider doing that. Which else? Okay, yeah, if you haven't got already an academia account, get an academia.edu account. This has become, it's not a fad, it's here to stay. And keep it consistently updated. It's so worthless and annoying for me when I see people create an account and there's nothing in it. So you need to make sure you're consistently uploading things in there, conference presentations, works in progress. You can open them up to people to comment on and build your networks in that way. Researchgate.net is kind of similar, but I don't think it's as popular as academia.edu because I'm always trying to hustle. I do operate both of those. So, you know, if you have the time. I also do Goodreads. Orchid is kind of required now for a lot of people, where that's just like a record of all your research tied to an Orchid account number. Kudos, I've tried. I'm not really keen on it, but there's other ones. There's other things like that. I don't know about Goodreads. It's a different type of audience. I didn't, you know, if you have the time, go for it. I'd definitely say get an academia.edu account, Twitter and Facebook. Again, if you can't maintain it, don't fool with it. You need to have some good juicy stuff in there. Again, it creates a sense of, oh, this person has a lot going on. If we go on there and you have like one old conference paper uploaded and your picture's not even in there, who's going to take you seriously? So you need to make sure you're creating a consistent brand, consistent presentation. Here's my website, and I think everybody who's really going to take this seriously and wants to go to the next level, get yourself a website. It doesn't cost a lot of money. I think I pay like the URL is like $10 a year, and the hosting space is a little bit more. I forget now, but yeah, that is a bit of an investment, but I think it's so worth it. When I was hired here at Kent, and now mind you, I mean, I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just being honest about, you know, the struggles that we face and how we can overcome them. You know, I do critical animal stuff. I do vegan stuff, and it's not especially a hot topic in sociology more generally. But I was able to really hustle with my brand. And when I was hired at Kent, which is, again, like not tooting my own horn, I just want to show you, oh, it's possible. We're the top research program for sociology in the whole country. And when I was hired, like people gave me a little bit of feedback and said, well, we looked at your website and your website looked pretty impressive. So people pay attention to this stuff is all I'm saying. And I spend a lot of time on my website. I put a lot of content on there. I really pay attention to the design. I want to make it look good. I want to make it functional. I want to make it really easy to use. I could do a whole webinar on just how to make your website optimal, because I've done a lot of research in this to make sure I'm getting the best bang for my buck. But this is just a screen grab from my page right now. If you're going on the job market, in the past, when I was on the job market, I put my dossier on there, lesson plans, things like that, that might not be necessarily interesting to other academics, but a job hiring committee, they would certainly want to look at that sort of stuff. So yeah, dress to impress. What I mean by that is make sure your website looks good. And nowadays, these websites, not like when I first got the internet back in the late 90s, where you had to do everything by HTML scratch. Nowadays, everything is made to be really user-friendly, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty with that. And if you do have difficulty with that, maybe it's worth hiring somebody, a friend or a professional, to do it for you. The other thing on websites I think is really important, and this is for promoting your work, is to create a blog and blog on current events, so those get shared, and blog on your research. Every time you produce any bit of research, you know very well that research can often be hard to understand for the lay person. And even for someone specialized in it, do they have time to read all of that? Probably not. So one of the best tips that I have is every time you publish anything, and sometimes even when I do conference presentations, I'll do a blog post and make it like 500 words or less, put pictures in it, and then people are more likely to be sharing it and using your work. They're social media friendly. Make sure you got all that, so the share buttons there to ensure it's as friendly as it can be. Make sure it's easy for people who are not specialized to read it. Words of the wise, make sure you use copyright-free pictures. The one right in front there probably is not. I've gotten busted on that. They'll email you and threaten you, and you just take it down and like, oh, sorry. But if you go to, there's websites like We Animals by Joanne MacArthur that has free pictures that you can use. Make sure you're not just throwing it up there, but also paying attention to the CEO and the keyword stuff, and that improves its shareability and how much it shows up on like Google searches and whatnot. Strangely enough, like I put up like 5 or 6 years ago, a series on social psychology concepts as they relate to veganism. And those are consistently the most accessed items on my website. And I think it's because I did so much work with the keywords, and people who are just researching the social psychology stuff come across my blog. So pay attention to that stuff. Is it readable as well? Like this is something I get dinged on. My website builder will warn me if my words are too big, my sentences are too long. The average person in the United States, I think, reads on like an 8th grade level, something like that. They don't read at a sophisticated university academic level. So make it in more simple terms. So yeah, make sure that when you're writing to your audiences, you're balancing this, because we're kind of straddling. We want to appeal to academics. We also want to appeal to the public. Not all the academics who are reading it are going to know exactly about your stuff. So can you make it approachable to anyone? And this is the same kind of thing when you're building job materials, when you're going on the market. The people who are going to be deciding whether you're hired or not may not specialize in critical animal studies. So how can you make this appealing to everyone? Activists may be a big part of the audience for you. Can they apply your research? Make it, so when I write my blogs, I'm like, here's the research I did, but here's how it's relevant to you, hoping that that'll make it easier for them to actually use your research and increase the impact. Then there's, of course, a general public, like I said, the social psychology people who's kind of wandered into my blog, who might just generally be interested. So sometimes I'll write on kind of general topics like the Brexit that just happened, or the Greggs sausage roll that blew up last year here in the UK. So people who are just interested in that topic might find their way to your work. Go light on the jargon, type like how you might speak. And this is, again, really important for when you're doing blogs. I think I sometimes look back and like, gosh, I could have been doing a lot of publishing back then. But actually, I think that was really important for building a written style that's more approachable to more people. When you work with an editor, if you do work with a blog, they'll help you with that. Like, hey, no one's going to understand that, and they'll send it back to you, and you can kind of develop those skills. The other thing you want to do is keep it short. Use short sentences, use lots of breaks, and lots of pictures. That's going to improve the chances that people will actually read it and actually share it. Memes, of course, are also really relevant for that. I'm kind of slow on my meme game lately, but here's some of the ones I've used in the past. Again, this is a way to kind of quickly bring interest to the stuff that you're doing, point attention to a particular argument or theory, things that can easily be shared and build networks and draw people back to your work. Okay, and always use the hashtags and links and all that kind of stuff. And then my last point before I give us a good summary and open it up to Q&A if we have time, is when we're talking about doing this stuff from the margins, one of the most important things that we need to be doing is helping each other out. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, this is part of a larger project, the Animal Ethics from the Margins, and that was founded by my beautiful and amazing friend who helped found Vegan Feminist Network, Dr. Cheryl Abate. And she was just really fed up. She's in philosophy, and that's the most male-dominated discipline that we have. And she recognized that we really need to be looking out for one another and making it easier to share one another's work. So always look out for one another, share their work on social media, recommend their articles on academia.edu. Cheryl and I do that every single time we publish publish our stuff. We boost one another, and the reads go up significantly when you suggest when you recommend somebody on that website. So don't take it lightly. It actually is very, very useful. You always want to cite your colleagues, cite them, especially if they're from marginalized groups, help them. That site count matters so much. If there's no sites, that work gets kind of lost to the ages. If you're involved in any kind of book project or conference, and there's a podcast you're a part of, recommend them, help each other out. This is the most important thing that we can do, is lift each other up. And so I know that a lot of this talk is about like this personal hustle, but you need to look out for one another as well, because that hustle is a collective hustle, a collective pushback. And really at the end of all this, what you're doing as well is not just helping the community, but you're building strategic relationships. When you do that quid pro quo, you're doing strategic relationships that will last you throughout your career. So look out for one another, consistently help each other out. Some resources is the Animal Ethics from the Margins that I just mentioned. Go check that out. Vegan Feminist Network. I've also got a lot of stuff on there. Critical Diversity Solutions. This is with Breeze Harper, who wrote Sister Vegan. You might find that useful. And the last bit is not in Critical Animal Studies, but We Grow Media. I found that to be a really useful resource. It's this guy who is an author, but he's demystified a lot of his branding techniques. He is for hire, but he has a lot of free stuff as well on his website. So there you go. This is my last slide. So this is what I'm going to encourage you to do. First things first, go get a picture made. Secondly, make a checklist. Make a checklist of all the promotional channels. Every time you do anything worth promoting, you go through it, and it might take you a day. Like for me, here goes my day, knock that day out the calendar. I'm going to go through all these promotional channels to push my work. Create a personalized networking directory. I didn't mention this earlier, but this is another important thing that I've done. Years ago, I created an Excel file. Anytime there's anybody important I wanted to know or needed to know or got in contact with, I put their name on that. And when I first got started, I just made it a daily task on my to-do list. Email 5 of these people and start building relationships with them. And so many of those blossomed into really amazing relationships that continue to help me today. Now I don't feel like I need to email 5 people every single day, but I still maintain that networking directory. And so now that I'm in a more established academic position, it becomes an important resource for an altogether different reason. For instance, when I'm putting together a special issue for a journal, or I'm putting together a conference, or I need someone to help me out with reviews, I can access that huge list that I've amassed over the years. So everyone should start small, create a list of important networks that you already have and networks that you want to build, and start on chipping away at that. Make it a daily practice. One thing you can do is make that website, right? Really consider doing a .com instead of one of the free things, because it just looks more professional. If you don't have social media already, do it. One of the biggest leaps of faith I did was when I moved off of a blog Facebook page and created an author Facebook page, where it was not just the name of my blog, but the name of me. I did get a little pushback, like, oh, you're so egotistical. It's like, that's the game we got to play. We got to make a name for ourselves. So go make yourself an author page and start putting stuff on it. And create shareable content and keep it fresh and keep posting. Make that on your daily to-do list. Every day I'm going to go on there and post something on here. And every day I'm going to work to build networks. If you want to go the extra mile, consider guest blogging, maybe once, or maybe a regular blogger. Reach out to podcasts that you like and offer to interview. reach out to some conferences, some of these digital ones that are popping up soon, and say, you know, I'm willing to talk, I'm willing to present. Another tip on that is I have a colleague who, he taught me this, I think it's so genius. Whenever he's traveling, he emails universities and says, hey, I'm in the area and I'm happy to do a free talk on my research. And a lot of times people take him up on that. And he did that with me. I was like, yeah, come on, I'll put a talk on. It'll look good for me as well. You know, it's a mutually beneficial situation. And another bit, this is the last bit, the last tip, if you want to go that extra mile, this is something I picked up from social psychology. If you want someone to really, really read your work, whenever I publish anything, I print out 5 copies and I pick 5 people I think would find it interesting, and I snail mail it to them, physically mail it to them. But most importantly, I put a sticky note on top with a personalized note. And the research has shown that that sticky note on top of the personalized note really increases the chances that someone's going to engage with that. And yeah, sometimes people just don't answer and they probably think I'm a weirdo, but a lot of times I get interesting emails back and it starts a relationship. So there you go. That's it in a nutshell. Lots and lots of stuff to work with there. So we're almost out of time. So I guess I'll throw it back over to Erin.
Thanks so much, Corey. That was great and super helpful. And I don't know, I think one of the big takeaways that I'm hearing is that folks should not be afraid to promote themselves, and don't be afraid to ask for opportunities, tell people about your work, be really proactive about reaching out and promoting yourself. That's like a, yeah, it's like a really, so what I'll do now is, since we are running out of time, is open up for questions. And how about if you have a question, just feel free to, you can, I guess, you know, we don't have too many people, but let's start it off with like, maybe you can use the reaction buttons and raise your hand, and I can unmute you. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Mark.
Thanks, Corey. I just had a quick question. Actually, I've been thinking about getting a website for a while, and I'm sure some others are too. And I know you bought like your own domain name and such, but I was wondering if you used a particular service like Blogspot or something like, or WordPress to sort of maintain the structure of the site, and if so, which one that you recommend?
I've been using WordPress so long. Forever. I remember using some when I was in university, but like nowadays WordPress is kind of dominated. I use the host I use is DreamHost, and the reason I use that is because when I started with the website stuff, I used I was using Vegan Feminist Network, and I was getting quite a lot of harassment and stuff. And DreamHost was actually used by some other feminist bloggers that I admired, and they really promoted that service and said, if you have to deal with people who harass you, we have a really tight protection system, and it's really good customer service. So I've been using them for years. So I can't really advise you, Mark, because I would go with what I know. But I bet you there's cheaper versions out there than DreamHost, but I've really enjoyed DreamHost so far.
Okay, thank you.
Get that site. Yeah.
I will.
Do it.
This inspired me to get working on that again. So
yeah.
And we have a question from Eveline, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly.
No, you're good.
Oops, I'm sorry. Oh, Eveline, you got, oh, there you are.
Sorry. So my question is, when you first start publishing, how do you start promoting yourself? Because I've been thinking about creating a website to kind of connect my research to my informants, my subjects, and also to give back whatever I'm studying to the community. But I kind of feel like if I have only one article under my belt, I feel like my website is gonna, like my new content is gonna end really quickly. So how do you start the marketing of yourself with only one publication at this point?
What a good question. Yeah. So actually I've been blogging since 2008 or so. And then my first article didn't come out till 2011. So I actually had built up kind of a brand before I started publishing through academic channels, because I remember I said I started out doing activist stuff. So what I would do, I was like blogging on current events, current debates, and animal rights. And actually my publishing career feeds right off of that. The two are just kind of the one in a way. So I would suggest that start blogging on current debates. What's your topic area? What do you study?
I'm an anthropologist, and I study the role of horses in society, and specifically the role of horses in rodeo.
Okay, why don't you start a website on that and like make that your theme? And then you could just start adding content on blogs where you have and you're an expert on this. There's not that many people who are experts in that. So you can start blogging on current events and that, and then spotlight your research when it comes out, as it comes out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, definitely do that. Yeah.
And then we have a question in the chat box from Marv asking about TikTok. Do you use TikTok? What about TikTok? It's paralleling YouTube in exposure, and its users are young, and they're a crucial audience to reach. That's for sure. What are you thinking about TikTok?
I'm a bit of a fuddy-duddy when it comes to TikTok, but I totally realize that I'm probably missing a market there. So maybe you guys are more that generation. I mean, I'm in my late 30s now, and I feel like I missed that boat. But yeah, that's like the hot thing right now. So,
and it's addicting. It is really fun. I
think that, Erin, that's the main reason I have stayed off of it, is I don't want to. I've already got so many media channels I'm sucked into every day. I don't want to go down the TikTok hole. But I would be really interested if anybody wants to email me and let me know if they've been using TikTok for promotional or professional reasons.
I mean, we can always do a follow-up workshop on TikTok.
Oh gosh,
especially if
I'll be
you
there.
have someone who has experience using it. Any other questions?
If there's anybody on Instagram Live who has questions, sorry, I've just been letting it stream, but if there's anybody who has a question, I'm happy to answer.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I don't know if you can see me. Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm doing a PhD at the University of Southampton, and I'm looking at sort of like the experiences of religious vegans in the UK, which is religion and veganism can be quite provocative comments. So my question really is, do you have any tips, especially with like social media, with any kind of like trolling or aggressive comments or anything kind of negative, how to deal with that?
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, the whole reason I chose that particular host for my website is because I've had to deal with serious harassment. That's why I don't use my real name on Facebook to this day, is because of harassment based on my blogging work. So it's serious, yeah. And it definitely threatened to bleed over to my professional life a few times. So do what you need to do to stay safe professionally. That's number one. Number two, one of the main joys of having Marv be my admin on Facebook is that he helps to kind of clear a lot of that out. Back in the day when I had more time, I would monitor the comments and, police them or whatever. And it just got to a point where it's like, I don't have time. And on Facebook and these things invite criticism. It feels like that's just kind of the way that they thrive, especially when I'm doing feminist work, because that's what feminists do. They criticize everything. So finally, I actually just reached a point where I have to be confident in the material I'm producing. Be sensitive to the fact that not everybody agrees with this viewpoint and it may be controversial, and just be confident. And I put it out there, and I just made a policy to myself: do not read the comments. I do not read the comments. I absolutely stop. And I'm going to be completely honest. I had some serious mental health issues. So when that harassment stuff I mentioned was really at its worst, and I actually deleted Facebook for a half a year. And I had to come back on Facebook. The main reason I got back on Facebook is my website traffic dropped to 0. So that's how crucial social media is to getting your work out there. But my suggestion is that whatever you post on there, think about, is this something that I would want my potential boss to see? Is this something I would want my potential job committee to see? If you feel confident that, yeah, this represents me and what I'm doing, then do it. But if you don't have the energy for it, don't read the comments. However, if you're just starting out and you're trying to build up a base, engaging with people in the comments is really important to build up that community and get them coming back. So like I said, my Facebook page has been rolling for like 10 years now. So there's a good group of people who just have been using it. So you just need to be strategic on that. And just my main concern is look out for you. You're number one. And number two, think about a potential employer. Would you be comfortable with them seeing this content? And if you feel comfortable with it, then yes, be confident and post it.
Thank you.
Good luck. It ain't easy out there especially for women.
All right. Any other, did you have anything from your Instagram page? I can't see. I don't have access.
No, I think we're good. If nobody else has any questions, we're up on the hour mark now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you again, Corey. Really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and stop recording, and